Well, I'll tell you, Larry, it seems like last week somebody I know was talking about socialism, and then at the State of the Union, President Trump brings up socialism. How you feeling today, Larry?
I feel okay. Jason, we identified never socialism as a thematic that must be carried by the people. The people have got to pick this up and they've got to acknowledge it. Now, whether Trump listens to your program or whatever, I don't know. But it is exciting that he's picking up the same thing. And folks, you must know that it wasn't Jason and I just some kind of crazy conspiratorial fear. For the president himself, Jason, to address this issue, where he did, in the State of the Union of all places, you know that it must be serious, a serious concern. You know it is.
Well, there's been a lot of press surrounding Alexandra Ocasio-Cortez and her push for democratic socialism and a lot of socialist programs. I have no indication that Donald Trump watches our show, but I like the fact that we're dialed into the types of things that people are concerned about and that the president is talking about.
Well, the never socialism for me, and I hope for you, as it stands right now, knowing what I know as a technical, just a person that studies and understands politics. Mm-hmm. As a technical, I can tell you, Jason, that the tricks the Democrats have in store for 2020, Trump is beat. He's beaten. He can't possibly win. And
what do you mean? Are you saying Trump can't win for 2020?
He can't possibly win, right?
What?
The reason being, we've discussed it here. Watch what happens. Now, remember the rule, 40-40-20. 40% love you, 40% hate you, and 20% don't care.
Right.
More readily identified as swing voters, right?
Right. Yeah.
So you've got the two basic bases. Here's the problem. The Democrats are introducing legislation in the House for reparation for the blacks with one purpose: to get Trump to fall off his numbers with the black community. His votes in the black community have been growing to the point that he could, for the first time, be able to use the black vote to help carry him across the finish line in 2020. So they've got to knock him out of the black vote. How do they do that? They do it by offering up a teaser campaign, reparation, passing it in the House. Now, folks, passing it in the House, in reality, to those that know our government, our form of government, and how it works, doesn't mean it becomes law.
Right.
It just means the House passed it. And, of course, it gets to the Senate, which is controlled by the Republicans, so we hope, and it gets defeated there. But even if it passed the Senate, it would get to Trump, and Trump would veto it. But even if Trump didn't veto it, and it went through the House, the Senate, and passed Trump's veto, it would go to appropriations, Jason, and it would be added to our unfunded liabilities because we don't have the money to pay it. So there's the black vote, but it's simply used to get the black vote excited about backing a Democrat, the Democrats in general, and the Democratic president. Then they've got the other killer bee, the millennials. They are introducing legislation. You've seen some of it being talked about already, but you're seeing legislation introduced where all college is free, but there's a kicker coming with it, that all outstanding college debt will be written off. Now, when you take the millennials out there, Jason, and you look at the number of them that are sitting with a couple $100,000 in college debt, it looks awfully enticing. Now, once again, the same thing will happen. It will pass in the House, but of course it won't pass in the Senate. But if it did, and if it passes Trump, it won't make it through appropriations because either one of those would technically bankrupt our nation.
What are they talking about with the reparations? What's the scope of it, and who would get it? Any person who's black gets it?
any person of nationality being African American born can prove birth in this country gets it. And it will be some formula figure that will turn out, they're saying, somewhere around $25,000 to $5,000 per individual. So if you've got 5 babies, you get $25,000.
What's the basis for that? How do they arrive at that number? I mean, I think it's a topic worth discussing, but it's obviously a lightning rod. I mean,
well, it's like the Green Deal from Cortez.
right.
I mean, it doesn't make mathematical sense at all, right? I mean, you just can't do it. You just can't, and it doesn't make sense at all that you would get rid of airplanes, because how are you going to catch a train to Europe, etc.
Right.
But it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter in the field of political theater, Jason. It doesn't matter. Political theater is what it is. Political theater. It's a world where you can live in dreamland.
Right.
And a good actor can sell a dream.
Yes.
And then when anybody comes out against it, then you're packaged as hate crime, racist. You're packaged as all kinds of those things that make you want to shut up.
Dynamex points out there's a $22 trillion debt. You know, Larry, something that people who agree with Ocasio-Cortez, or perhaps are kind of like Ocasio-Cortez, frequently say is that, oh, well, you know, we've got enough money for all these wars. Why can't we pay for this or that or the other thing? The point is, we don't have money for all these wars. They just keep building the debt. I mean, I don't know how you conduct your finances, Larry, but if you've got, you know, $1,000 on your credit card bill that you can't pay, it's a bad idea to go out and buy more stuff and say, well, I wasted that $1,000, I might as well waste another $1,000.
Well, but when you're living in Cortez's world, right? Money's not real at the government level, and that's what hurts us, Jason, with so many people. How does so many things get passed when the general public, doing just the simple logic you just did, should be able to see through it quickly, right? I mean, everybody wants to see we can't spend beyond our means, but there's this misnomer out there. There's this fallacy out there that, guess what? The federal government can just print money. If it needs another $1 trillion, it just prints it.
Well, they do that, of course, but it reduces the value of our economy.
Right. Every dollar bill, whether it be $1 or whether it be $1,000 bill, costs the Federal Reserve 3 cents. But they charge us $1 to $1,000 plus 16% interest. So we go in debt. Every one of those dollars that just gets printed, or we sell out our country to countries like China by selling our bonds, United States bonds and treasuries.
Yeah. Well, I think the Federal Reserve is a big problem. Most people who listen to Crowdsource the Truth, I think, would agree with that. And, you know, I, for one, Charles Ortel the other day was talking about the need for the United States to draw down the debt, the deficit. You know, obviously those are, I'm not an economist, so these are difficult things for me to get in depth on, but I mean, I go back to my original analogy. If you've got $1,000 on the credit card bill, you got to pay that before you spend another $1,000. And although deficit spending to a certain degree has its purpose and its uses, I think when we're looking at this constantly, you know, increasing, they say Obama doubled the deficit or whatever it was to 10 trillion, 20 trillion, whatever it is. We've got to figure out a way to get that paid down, and just throwing away every single traditional method of producing energy to develop these as yet unknown technologies doesn't seem like a practical plan at all. I would have been much happier to see a sensible congressperson, man, woman, black, white, whatever, come up with a plan that says, hey, you know what, if we do this step that requires technology that we already have and know about, it would incrementally have this effect of saving this much money, and it would cost this much money, and it's a realistic thing that we can do versus this plan that AOC put forward that, I mean, frankly, you could ask a 10-year-old and they would say, yeah, we're going to get rid of all the cars and plant flowers and stuff. Doesn't mean it's an actual plan.
That's right. But to show you the power of political theater, look at the number of senior legislators, congressmen, senators, Democrats that went on with her.
Yeah.
You see the gathering around her. These are people that were wise enough, smart enough, been there and nothing else long enough to know the ludicrousy of what they were getting involved with. But they signed on because of the political theater. Now, how do you pull off political theater that is such a joke as this Green Deal?
Yeah.
Well, when you control the media, Jason, now, if everybody in America was forced to spend 10 minutes a day listening to you or someone like you that has no reason to do anything but just level with the people, if they were forced to do that, then, none of this stuff would happen. But they're not. So all they get's what the mainstream media dishes out.
Yeah.
It's as simple. Your strategy of figuring the $1,000 on your credit card, that is so simple, so honest, so true, but so too is ask people if 4 Mexicans came to your house and knocked on the door and said, hey, we're just moving in, you got to feed us, support us, take care of our medical needs, house us, the whole 9 yards. Would you let them in?
Well, I think they could be from any country, anybody, even if they were from down the street. I don't want my friends coming and staying here for months at a time, freeloading on the couch.
Right. But you see, the answer would be obviously no. But yet they can't seem to make that connection to our southern border.
Yeah.
It's the same difference, folks. Every person that comes in across that border, regardless of where they come from, everyone that comes into this country illegally cost us $74,000 a year minimum. And that's if they don't get put in jail. And when they get put in jail, it goes to $124,000 a year.
Wow. Now, Larry, I'm
How do
sure
we pay
you will.
that, Jason? How
What's
do we
that?
pay it?
Yeah, that's a good
that?
question. I thought that Donald Trump did a great job with his speech in El Paso last night. And I mean, it was incredibly strategic, of course, because he went to a town where it's a border town. And I guess when did the wall, he made a lot of references to how effective the wall has been in El Paso. And I can only assume based on the response of the crowd. I have been to Donald Trump rallies and they do fill up quite a lot with people. And everybody there from El Paso seemed to be very pleased that this wall protects them from Juarez, Mexico. Do you know when that wall in El Paso was built, Larry?
It seems as though it was started 4 or 5 years ago when Juarez became known primarily for the cartels. Anybody in the media that printed anything bad, they came in and just killed everybody at the newspaper. And the murder and everything just became so violent, so over the top, that they had to do something, and they started on the wall. Now, I do not know if they started 4 or 5 years ago. I don't know if maybe when Trump got in 2 years ago, they accelerated. I have no idea. But he was telling the truth. Merely feet from that wall is one of the most violent communities in the world, right across. And people don't even realize, when you start talking about 40,000 murders in a year, 40,000 murders in a year. Now, that doesn't take into account how many people are wounded.
Right.
That's just murder. Well, now, folks, go take a place like Afghanistan, Syria. Those numbers are similar to what they run into.
Wow.
They truly are.
It's like a war zone. Larry, let me share this with you. We've got an article here from the New York Post. This is from January 13th, 2018, and the headline says that this town is proof that Trump's wall can work. It shows a Border Patrol agent keeping an eye on the fence in El Paso, Texas. And, this is an article that is supporting what Donald Trump and the people in El Paso, Texas are saying. Incidentally, the Post is also telling us that the jury in the El Chapo trial has just found him guilty on all counts today. So that's quite interesting, and along a similar line. Now, in contrast to this, Larry, when I look at NBC News, they've posted an article, looks like yesterday, saying that Trump's claims a wall made El Paso safe, data shows otherwise. So, these guys are saying that Trump is lying, and crime in the city where Trump plans to hold a campaign rally Monday night has been falling since 1993, but a border fence wasn't completed until 2009.
Well, see, here again, if you control the media, right? So if the mainstream media comes out and says the data says this, that, or the other, and that Trump's a liar, that's all people get fed.
Right.
That's all they get. Now, again, I remind everybody, this is something people won't want to believe, but you better. 98% of the people in America that are going to vote in the 2020 election, 98% get 100% of that which they consider to be all the news they need to make a decision for who to be president or their congressman or senator from their 6 and 10 o'clock local television news. And what that means is when you break down your local 6 and 10 news telecast, by the time they do weather, sports, local features, et cetera, it's 4 to 7 minutes tops for national news. And every bit of the national news they get, generally, I'll say generally, comes from a feed from their main network out of Washington or New York.
Right.
So whoever controls ABC's news out of Washington and New York control what you see in Humnoke America.
Yeah.
The same holds true with your newspapers. Your newspapers do not, contrary to popular belief, folks, most small town, medium town, medium cities, etc., do not have reporters, a staff in Washington, D.C. They take their feed from UPI or AP, Associated Press.
Right.
So if you control what Associated Press is allowed to put out, then guess what? You control what goes into most every local newspaper.
Yeah. Yeah. And certainly anything published in the New York Times or the Washington Post gets republished simply saying, hey, the New York Times says X, Y, and Z. Now, we've found kind of this is a current article that's just come up that's trying to do exactly this. A lot of people have been sending this to me, Larry. I'm just going to try to get to it real quick here. This is an article that I am not familiar with this news source, so I can't vouch for this necessarily, but this is making a claim that a person who is involved with Adam Schiff has reported abuse, but it's a strange article, and I want to preface this by saying I believe this to be fake news. It's not loading for some reason, but it shows a picture of a guy who's got a huge shiner on his face, and it says that he's Adam Schiff's gay lover. Now, it's not loading, so perhaps it's been pulled, but this is an article that says LA Times, Adam Schiff, gay lover, makes claims of abuse. But I've been unable to find the original reporting in the LA Times, which causes me to suspect that it's fake news. And that's a common technique. People will just say, well, I didn't say it, the LA Times said it, and then they think they're absolving themselves of any, I think it's been pulled, Larry. It's not coming up.
Well, let me just tell y'all that I am suspect of that article. I know exactly what Jason is referring to. And a person that works with me did contact the LA Times, and the writer of the article, although they spelled her name wrong in that article, did work at the LA Times.
Yeah,
she
but
really
anybody
did work there.
Anybody could read the LA Times and pull the name of a reporter.
Right. And they said that when she wrote an article, it was trustworthy. But folks, you can't go by that.
Right.
You cannot go by that. This stuff kills us. This stuff kills us. And you say, well, yeah, but it's good. It's bad against Adam Schiff. No. When something comes out about Adam Schiff that is fake, it hurts us. It doesn't help us. It doesn't hurt Adam Schiff. It gives him perfect cover. Now, I will tell y'all something that I know. I'm not ready to release totally how I know it, but I can assure you, I don't know the depth of that story, of that article, but Schiff did have, or still does have a male lover. And
How do you know that?
Well, that's where I've got to be careful, but he did rough the lover up. Now,
How do we know all this,
part
Larry?
of the
Hang
reason,
on.
part of the reason I can say with confidence that it did happen, not that article, please understand, I'm not substantiating that article. It's because of the slush fund that Congress set up for itself to pay off, anybody filing suit against a congressman for sexual abuse or for whatever. They did set up a fund to pay for all of that. And Adam Schiff used some of that fund to pay to a male in a sexual, whatever you want to call it, lawsuit.
Well, I heard that the other day, but it also seemed false to me because of the way it was being reported. And I don't really rely on Snopes, but when I just Googled that, Snopes was the first thing to come up. And the interesting thing is, it seems that piece of information originated with the same source, the netspies.com. I've never heard of this before, the netspies.com.
Never heard of it. And
well, here's their article.
It can be used to discredit the true story. Now think of this. The reason I've been holding off is to get absolute verification of all of it, so that anybody that talks about it can substantiate what they say. Well, here comes this article that you're talking about. It comes out a year ago. And then if it's discredited, then Schiff gets a buy when the real stuff comes out.
Right.
Because he'll say, that's been discredited. I've seen it work over and over and over again. That's why I'm so hesitant to go by these kind of articles, Jason.
Yeah. There was some guy who was a donor or something to Adam Schiff. Right, here we go. Allegations. Now, let's see, I don't know. Is this a West Hollywood newspaper here, the WeHo Times? So Adam Schiff's district is in West Hollywood, and we were looking into this a little bit when some stuff came up with the Standard Hotel, which is also near West Hollywood, and Ed Buck, that's the guy's name. So Ed Buck, I believe, is a donor to Adam Schiff, and there have been two unfortunate circumstances where young males have showed up dead at his house from doing crystal meth. And we're looking at a picture right now of Adam Schiff with Ed Buck, and even if Ed Buck is directly connected to these crystal meth deaths, simply knowing him doesn't implicate Adam Schiff in anything. But then at the same time, as you say, Larry, if Adam Schiff is guilty of something, certainly one defensive tactic might be putting out a lot of ridiculous stories that get proven to be fake, so that when a real story comes out, people who support Adam Schiff their initial thought will be, well, this is fake too.
Well, and I can give you a good example of that. I have, Jason, never have I ever said the Clintons killed anyone. I've never said that. I have said that there have been an inordinate number of people that were involved with the Clintons that have ended up dead by mysterious death. Okay? I didn't say they killed them. I've never said they ordered people to be killed. As a matter of fact, I have said, when you're some big company making millions and billions of dollars off of the Clintons being in power, you don't need to be told when your boy's about to get in trouble. Sometimes people like that tend to their own business. And then when you know that the Clintons frequently, Bill frequented with Dan Laster and other known big time drug people.
Yeah.
It shouldn't be odd that if their guy gets in trouble that they wouldn't ride in to take care of him, possibly.
Larry, correct me if
The
I'm wrong.
only thing I ever said, Jason, was that people around them died mysterious deaths. Now, if you get on the internet and Google me, you will see everybody and their brother discredit me because I'm the guy running around saying the Clintons killed all these people. I didn't say that.
Right.
But it just totally discredits us.
Right. Well, Larry, let me ask you this. And so did you ever meet Dan Lassiter?
You bet. Oh, my God, yes.
Okay. Let's play this for a second.
He and Barry Seal, all of them.
Wow.
You got to remember, I'm random.
Sorry, let me play this. This is Dan Lassiter at the Senate Whitewater hearings.
Misleading news articles. Outrageous and totally false stories about me have appeared in both the local and national newspapers and magazines. A good example of that was in this morning's Wall Street Journal, where I was called a convicted drug dealer by Mr. Simpson. And I challenged Mr. Simpson and Wall Street Journal at this time to prove any evidence that they have on that, because that's not been the case.
So I believe he's splitting hairs here, if I'm not mistaken, because he was a drug dealer, wasn't he? He's admitted to using cocaine to turn girls into prostitutes.
Yes, well, he actually was a intermediary for Barry Seal in the pipeline of drugs, and he was convicted. However, he was granted a pardon, full and complete pardon by Bill Clinton.
Now, wait a minute. I didn't realize this, Larry, but we've got Michael Chertoff in these Whitewater hearings here.
Uh-huh, sure enough.
What the hell was he doing there? He's been directly involved in, what is he, the director of Homeland Security, and he owns that company that scans us all at the airport?
Mm-hmm. Chertoff was involved in the Whitewater investigation and all of the Clinton investigations. He was in it. I worked with him.
What's your impression of Chertoff?
Creep.
Yeah.
He's a creep, and I don't much believe in anything or much of anything that he dare say after what I saw him personally do. You know, what I know he was holding and what he said publicly.
What can you tell us about that?
Well, I mean, he knew, for example, that, let's just take one. He was involved with, what's his name, in the Vince Foster investigation.
Kenneth Starr?
Kenneth Starr, yes. He was a part of that task force, and he knew that Vince Foster did not die in Fort Marcy Park the way they said he did.
Ooh,
and remember, I'm not saying somebody killed him, but I can say and prove positive by their own investigative materials that he didn't die in Fort Marcy Park.
Right.
They moved the body.
Chertoff was also part of Covington and Burling, the law firm that Eric Holder is a senior partner at, and that is currently doing a terrible job of representing General Michael Flynn. It's amazing how close all these things are kept to the vest, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, look, they just hop from thing to thing to thing. It's just a click. It's a giant click. And as I've said over and over and over, people have heard me say it, so it's not anything new. I've said, politics makes for strange bedfellows. One minute it appears you're fighting with this person or that politically. Next minute you turn around and you find out they're working with them.
Now, a lot of people have criticized me for not saying things about Israel. I mean, I think they presume because I'm Jewish I should talk about Israel, but my ancestors came from England. Should I talk about England, and should I talk about Poland and Russia? I don't really know that much about Israel, but Larry, do you know anything about members of Congress having dual citizenship with Israel? Is that a rampant problem? Does Chertoff have dual citizenship with Israel? It says his mother is an Israeli citizen, so that might lead us to believe.
He might be, but he's not a member of Congress either.
Right, right.
So, you know, to my knowledge, being a lobbyist, being a law firm working, if you look at the law firms that work with the majority of the major high-profile cases out of Washington, most all of those firms are usually under Jewish-named.
Oh, well, I agree, but that's a little bit like saying there's a lot of black guys in the NBA. It's just, I think.
I agree. I'm not saying, you know, I'm not one that, look, I'm telling y'all, I don't know of any Israeli conspiracy to overthrow the world. I don't. Does that mean there's not one? No. Does it mean there is one? No. It means I don't know, and I don't endeavor to get involved in it. And because I don't get involved with it, just like I'm sure with you, Jason, I'm guilty of being pro-Israel and everything.
Right.
Not the case.
Yeah, I'm no more pro-Israel than I am any other democratic country that's not, you know, trying to kill people. Although, I mean, you know, the United States and Israel and England and France and all these countries are quite guilty of, you know, you look at what happened in Libya. I believe all of these countries have people in the top echelons of government that are globalists, that are conspiring to undermine all of us and devalue the currency and keep us all with that $1,000 on the credit card so that we're constantly running to stand in place. I mean, you know, it's only since World War II that the United States and England and all these allies created Israel. Without knowing very much about it, Larry, I would have to say that, you know, Israel seems like a pawn of the United States. There's a lot of people who like to see it the other way. I haven't seen sufficient evidence to indicate that tiny little Israel with less money, less military, less people could somehow control the United States. People are going to be all over me for saying this, but...
Yeah, you're in trouble now, buddy.
Yeah.
But I'm just like you. Look, I know Ben Netanyahu. I've known him for years and years and years.
Wow.
Does that make him a good guy? Hell, I knew Dan Laster.
Right.
You know, I knew Barry Seal. What does that make me? I ran with some bad people. I've run with some good people. Personally, I think Ben is a good guy. Now, does that mean I endorse everything he does? Of course not. But I'll tell you something else. I don't know the intelligence that he has that he makes his decisions off of. I don't know. You don't know. We don't know. But I can tell you this about Netanyahu. He does everything he can, and everything he does in the interest of protecting Israel.
Right.
Which kind of, if you think about it, that's his job.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I can understand why Putin would be staunchly pro-Russia. I can understand why Gaddafi would be staunchly pro-Libya, and I can understand why, you know, Hugo Chavez or Maduro or any of these guys would be super pro-Venezuela. They're you know, interested in their countries succeeding. And I mean, I think that the use of Israel in the Middle East on the part of the United States and the United Kingdom is to act as a foil against all of the non-democratic, non-allies to the United States that are in that region. And I think that the United States has used Israel as a lever since its inception. But again, this is a topic I don't know that much about, and it incites crazy comments and people who have very strong opinions about this who I'm just not prepared to discuss because I don't know that much about it. I'm focused on what's going on in the United States. And let's get back to this socialism aspect.
We had better be what we had better be concerned about here in this country. First off, let me say, you understand why all those people you mentioned were loyal to the countries from which they represent.
Yeah.
I don't understand why Trump's position of standing for America first is such an obstacle for the Democrats to accept.
Right.
I mean, it just, you know, that's foreign to me. But the thing that we all have to realize is socialism is on us now. It's not something in the shadows anymore, Jason. when you've got the Bernie Sanders of the world, when you've got the Hillary Clintons of the world, when you've got the Cortezes of the world, when you've got everybody, people in our government right now who staunchly support converting us from a constitutional representative republic to a socialist government, we got problems.
Yeah.
They're there.
Yeah. I mean, that's an infiltration and a takeover.
That's right. And then when you add to that mix, you've got Islam, Sharia, Muslims. They're actively there now in our government. Which, Jason, it's hard for me. This is tough for me because I don't care if you're a congressman or a woman and you're of Islamic faith, fine. But you should be an American.
Yes.
What gets me is the way these people go to Washington, but they represent Islam, not America.
Yeah, well, that's proven out
dangerous.
by swearing into Congress with a hand on the Koran. I think that we should make a new law that anyone being sworn into government in the United States needs to swear an oath on the Constitution and set their religion aside. I think that if you are serving the people of the United States, that's got to come first.
Ohio is an example. In Ohio, I know because I helped the state representatives introduce the legislation. Some representatives in Ohio tried to pass in their state house, a law that would only allow U.S. constitutional law to be practiced in court. That's it. That's all it said. Didn't pick anybody out. It didn't land anybody. It just said there should only be one form of law, and that's United States constitutional law.
Yeah.
Did you know when they introduced that, they couldn't even get enough, and that was when it was controlled by Republicans. Their state house was controlled by Republicans. They couldn't even get enough representatives to get it out of committee. See, that's how close we are. If you look at the ground level at what I've seen and what I see, you would understand that socialism, never socialism, is a realistic statement today. It's a realistic goal. It's not something you say just for political expediency. It's the truth. And we have to have people, Jason, we have to have people in this audience listening to you and I right now commit to do what it takes to never let this country fall into the grips of socialism. And it's hard to do.
Yeah.
It's hard to do. It's going to be harder to do because they will lie. And they will paint a lollipop picture of socialism that on its face seems to make sense, right?
Right. Well, that's just it. I mean, think about it, Larry. We've got this system that's basically devalued the dollar over years and years. I've seen countless stories about how, I was born in the 70s. So when I hear some story talking about, the value of the dollar from 1975 to 2015, it's like 90% less. That's not accurate, but I saw something that was like a shocking decrease in the buying power of the dollar. Within my lifetime, it starts to really hit home a little bit, because how can people who are going to college now ever hope to own a house and, do all of these sort of things? And capitalism is so at the core of what America is. That ridiculous Green New Deal included plans for giving out money to people who are unwilling to work. Capitalism, when it's not being taken advantage of by shysters, is based on human nature. If someone is offered money to do nothing versus money to work a difficult job, if it's the same amount of money, certainly someone would take the do nothing and get money option. And frankly, it's hard to imagine. We would just have a nation of people sitting around. That would just fail. How would that possibly work? You tax the rich 70%, they're going to move to other countries, they're going to find ways to shelter their money offshore. They're going to be de-incentivized from starting businesses and things like that. I mean, everything about America is about having the opportunity to live your dream. And I'm sure if we examined Ocasio-Cortez, how did she get the money to run for Congress? It wasn't because the government gave it to her. It had to be people who went out and earned it and, you know, probably supported her campaign. Or I'm curious to know how she got elected.
Right. Well, you know, folks, it's easy to sit back and say, well, the big capitalist companies, the big rich people, they control it. They control our government. Now, our government is supposed to be in a position, for example, with monopolies. You know, it busted up AT&T. It busted up Southwestern Bell when they had a big monopoly. It busted them up, which created a drop in the rates for phone calls, all the stuff we see today, because they busted that monopoly. But they're not busting up the monopolies that exist today.
Yes.
Well,
yes.
then you get mad and say, well, it's our form of government. No, it's not. Look, we elected representatives and senators. We elected members of Congress and the Senate. We elected them. And these are the people that are willing to be purchased and bought by these major players.
Yeah.
It's our fault.
Yeah.
It's not the major players' fault, because if you were rich and you had a company and were making a gazillion dollars, you would do everything in your power to protect your gazillion dollars.
Yeah.
You would. You say you wouldn't, but you would.
Yeah. Well, I'm curious to know if Ocasio-Cortez is willing. First of all, there was an article about this documentary about her, a campaign that's going on Netflix, and it was purchased apparently for $10 million. And I mean, obviously I would be surprised if any substantial portion of the sale of a documentary about her was actually going to her, but that would be interesting to know about as well. Generally speaking, the subject of a documentary doesn't participate in the finances of it, but it's a lot of money. It makes sense that Netflix would buy that simply based on the popularity of Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. A lot of people will want to watch this movie. It's a pretty huge sum to be paid for a documentary. Documentaries typically don't make that much money, but I'm curious if the people who sold that film for $10 million want to give $7 of those million to people who didn't work on the documentary and are unwilling to work on anything. I also want to point out, Larry, Wendy Sloan is watching us on YouTube right now, and she points out when she was a kid in the 60s, in the 1960s, a candy bar cost 5 cents, and now it's $1.85. So that causes me to think it's very interesting. Capitalism, it needs to be regulated, because any system is going to be, people are always trying to game the system, right? So when we hear Trump say, oh, look, socialism is failing in Venezuela, I think it's a little bit unfair, because he doesn't talk about the things that some of the capitalists in the United States have done to cause socialism in Venezuela to fail. I don't think socialism is right for America, but perhaps the people in Venezuela want it. And as I'm not that knowledgeable about Venezuela. I've been trying to increase my understanding of what's going on there. I've been watching a lot of reporting from Abby Martin and people who have studied it and know a lot more about it than I do. And it seems that the oil companies, which have influence over our politicians, have played a role in getting sanctions put on Citgo and other assets of Venezuela to strategically squeeze them. So when you put out a plan like we're going to turn off all the cars and get rid of gasoline, it just is so naive on the surface of it. It just doesn't even begin to approach a solution, in my view.
Yeah, except if you forget about political theater and the power thereof. How many people out there in this country right now, Jason, believe it?
A lot.
Believe it. A lot.
Millions.
A lot. And when you understand 40-40-20, folks, 40-40-20 means 40% of the people out there, if any one of you running for office, half of them would like you, and the other half would hate you. And then 20% don't care.
Yeah.
So
Larry, I just
you're
noticed
dealing
something
with
else
such
strange.
a small number. Uh-huh.
I'm looking at this very communist kind of Che Guevara looking sign advertising Ocasio-Cortez, and it says Bronx and Queens, and I believe that's the district that she covers, but the Bronx and Queens are sort of not adjacent to one another in New York and could have vastly different demographics. Do you want to talk for a second about gerrymandering and how it would come about that the 14th District of New York would cover Bronx and Queens?
Once again, it gets back to there's nothing wrong with our form of government, folks. Even though it's broken, there's nothing wrong with it. It's not the government that's broke, it's the people we put in. They are able now to take a district, a congressional district, and when one side gets in power, you got to watch out that this stuff that the average Joe on the street does not pay attention to, Jason. So who cares about gerrymandering? Who cares about redistricting, right? It's not a big thing on our dial. It's not like the Super Bowl or which team is our favorite baseball team. But what happens, they come in, and you can look at a territory, you can look at a region geographically, you can pick it out, and you can say, well, this one's got a lot, let's say, blacks in it. This one's got a lot of Hispanics in it. Well, wouldn't it be neat if those two were your strengths to get you more of those people in your district? So when one side or the other's in power, what they do is they literally take the borders of their representatives' district and they shape them to guarantee they've got the majority of the votes that they need. It doesn't make sense geographically. You know, some of the districts in this country, in the states, you can't even believe you would call them the same district. There'll be a little spot here, a little spot over here, a little spot over here. But what it does is it gives you an aggregate of the votes you need to stay in power, and they stay in power.
Well, you know, it's interesting. When I look at it on the
nobody
map,
pays attention to it.
yeah, when I look at it on the map, it's not as far apart as it seemed to me because, yeah, I mean, but still, I mean, going there, I don't know why that would be. It's a weird shape. I mean, how they're so oddly, arbitrarily decided.
Well, they're decided, and they're decided in perpetuity, which means if you can get this, that, and the other done, for example, illegal immigration, if you can back illegal immigrations and get them coming in by the millions, and then if you ever get in a position where you can make those people be allowed to vote, the Democrats will be in power forever, so they figure.
Yeah.
Now, the Republicans, the rich guys, the corporate people, they're wanting them to come in for cheap labor. But in any event, we get beat. We, the average American, we get hurt because they're either coming in to take jobs or they're coming in as potential voting bloc that forever changes this country. You know, when I think of Cortez, I think of one thing, and I think it was you that even brought it up. Here she was a waitress. She was Miss Average, little young woman who had nothing America, right? But then I see her in $3,000 suits of clothes. How does she do that?
Yeah. Yeah, she's
We're just
very
waiting
much
on
a
tables
product.
to get you a $3,000. Yeah, we're just $3,000 suits coming from waiting on table.
Right. Right, and she's also been like, it's almost like got this team of super friends in the freshman Congress class here where Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez is hanging out a lot with Ilhan Omar, and if I'm not mistaken, President Trump called for Representative Omar to resign today over a series of hateful tweets that she put out. It's interesting to me that someone like Laura Loomer challenged Ilhan Omar and then got forced off of Twitter after, I believe it was CARE, Laura told me, campaigned to get Laura off of there for what they perceived as hateful tweets about Islam. But here we've got Ilhan Omar putting out all these hateful tweets about Judaism in Israel, and that's fine. She sent an apology yesterday that, in my view, Larry, it read very much like something that a sophisticated PR expert put together, kind of like a spin control. Talk to us a little about that, Larry, when Bill Clinton or Hillary Clinton would have a gaffe that had to be addressed and they needed somebody to come in and do this so-called damage control, something that Ocasio-Cortez and her campaign have apparently been doing after this Green New Deal has been met with essentially universal derision as being a stupid plan written by a 5-year-old. What's that spin process look like?
Well, in her case, with hers, if you notice, folks, they came out saying, the media, that the actual plan that she originally laid out, which was from Planet Nutbag, that wasn't her plan at all, that was something the conservative media put together.
Right.
That wasn't at all what she said. And then
somehow they got it on her website.
Right. They did a rewrite and made it make a little more sense. But what Jason's talking about, most all politicians that have gained any kind of level, I guess, they have spinmeisters, people like me. Our job is to set back when a candidate or a politician makes a mistake, a gaffe, does something stupid. It's our job to set back, not to have passion involved, just be very stone sober and come up with a way to lie your way out of it. And then it takes a good politician to take what someone writes and say it like you believe it. Good politicians are actors. Good politicians are actors. They can take a script just like a movie star.
Right.
They can take a statement and read it and sound like they mean it. When, to be honest, if you're not careful, they don't even know what they're talking about. That's why you see all these things where they'll put out a statement and then you'll see this copy point that goes with it. Well, that 10 copy points, that's all they know. The 10 things they were giving other spin people to say, to answer. And it's a deadly process because, folks, very seldom now do you actually hear a politician expressing their real views on something.
Right. Unless it's Donald
Everything
Trump.
is calculated. Yeah, unless it's Trump, and that's why they pick at Trump.
Yeah.
And they're constantly, even his people are constantly begging him to stay on script, stay on script. But there's no doubt, I believe, that people know where Donald Trump stands on something. Well, the problem is where he stands, and he's not ashamed of it.
Yeah.
Right, wrong, or indifferent, he's certainly not ashamed of it, and he will stand up for it. But you won't catch any other politician out there that'll do that.
Right.
Their every word is carefully calculated. You know, years ago, folks, you didn't even know about stuff called focus groups and all of this inside polling data and push polls and pull polls and all the things that go into giving a candidate where he stands on something. You know, good God, if you're a candidate, you should know where you stand on these things. Mm-hmm. But they don't. They're told where to stand, which gives them the calculated best number of votes. It's all based off that. And we've gotten to a point now, Jason, to where that's actually caught up with us. Now Washington is not real. It's finally almost universally not real.
Right.
The people there, they're just front men for different groups. And whichever group has the most money buys the most politicians, and those politicians carry their message, and their message is the one that benefits whoever their sugar daddy is.
You've just hit it, Larry. See, I think this is the biggest problem that we are facing, because what you've just described corrupts capitalism, corrupts foreign policy, and even if Ocasio-Cortez's stupid green plan went anywhere, that would be corrupted as well. In fact, I think she herself represents corruption that has yet to be revealed because, she was elected, she went in there, according to her, she got inaugurated in January for Congress, and then it was shut down, and then I guess she was doing extra credit homework over the shutdown, because how did she write this whole plan in such a short period of time? Obviously, this is somebody else's plan that she is a front woman for, as you said, almost like an actress, and there are a lot of aspects to her that remind me very much of these reality show celebrities or social media celebrities, which I guess people in the comments will accuse me of being, but I'm not running around trying to promote stupid plans that won't work. But it just seems very much like here she is calling for socialism and giving out money to people who can't afford it. But as you pointed out, she's appearing in expensive clothes. She's got this Apple Watch. She's giving us all these ridiculous plans that seem to be fed to her. And she seems to be reciting lines.
And let me bring it home. Here you've got all of this money playing such a role in our government. And then you've got people like Jason and I. We're here simply trying to bring whatever information we can bring, whatever truth we can bring, and we have nothing. Where's our base of support? That's why Jason's program and the way it's funded is so important to me, because I know as long as he is audience sponsored, that you drive the bus.
That's
not
right.
some sugar daddy company that wiggles its way in and then tell Jason what he can or can't say. Now, folks, I've been on the receiving end of that. I've been on programs that started out honest and humble, and then all of a sudden, they're big time. And then all of a sudden, before I go, oh, they're telling me what I can and can't say.
Right.
Well, I don't do that. But that's why your group, this program, means so much to me, because, Jason, I appreciate what you're doing by trying to stay as honest as you can, to be able to give honest opinions and not have to answer to some big guy that controls you.
I appreciate that, Larry.
That's not the truth.
It's a really important part of what I wanted to do with Crowdsource the Truth from the time that I started it, by having it audience sponsored and not having ads or having some major company pulling the purse strings. Everybody watching knows that the information is for them, and no one has any undue influence. In fact, when people send me emails saying like, hey, I'm a sponsor and you should do this or that, I frequently terminate their sponsorship, send them back their $5 or $10, and just tell them that they don't understand how this is intended to work. And I appreciate your kind words, Larry, and I appreciate you coming on the show every week. I do want to remind people that
Jason,
Larry...
They're not kind words. That's the truth.
Thank you.
It'd be different if it was kind words, but it's not kind words. It's the absolute truth at a time when we need it so desperately.
Yeah.
Dear God, I wish there were more programs that would adopt what you have with Crowdsource the Truth. I wish there were more.
Thank you.
But they're not.
Yeah. Well, and I appreciate you tremendously, Larry. You're sharing your insights and your experiences with some of these political players who remain in our government today or hanging around the periphery. So I definitely want to encourage our viewers to visit nicholslive.com. I've been showing Larry's payment addresses throughout the show here. And of course, if you go to paypal.com, use Larry's email address, nicholslive@aol.com, to financially support Larry. I'm showing his mailing address on screen right now. If you'd prefer to send checks, his address is right there. He's in Conway, Arkansas. Very brave of Larry to publish his mailing address on the internet, but at this point, anybody who wants to get Larry knows where he is, and he's not afraid.
That's right. Well, and think about this, Jason. We do this, folks, where every time Jason's kind enough to ask people to help me, but I think y'all might misunderstand sometimes. Do you know how many people, folks, when I put out a call for help, with the thousands of people that hear me, do you have any idea how many people actually help? Maybe
1%?
2, maybe 3.
Wow.
No, I'm talking about 2 or 3, period.
Wow.
2 or 3. And that's very disheartening. It makes you want to just roll over and say, why? Why do I put my family through this? Why do I stick my name and address out there for anybody to see?
Yeah.
You know, I don't go by, nor do you, Jason. We don't go by some handle, trucker's
Right.
handle. You know,
Right.
we use our name. So,
Yeah.
folks, Crowdsource the Truth needs your participation. And by the way, guys, if you're not participating in Crowdsource the Truth, or if you're not doing something to fight for this country, don't claim you're a patriot. Just listening and hearing stuff is not doing. It's not.
Yeah. And
So I wish you would get in with us.
Yeah, and for the people who are in financial situations that prevent them from sponsoring Larry or myself, you can also help by sharing these broadcasts, emailing them to friends, spreading it out.
Yep.
If every person watching would just share the link with 2 or 3 or 4 people, that gets the word out much more. So Larry, we'll be back next Tuesday at 3 o'clock as we always are, but we're out of time for today. Was there anything you wanted to share with everybody as we close out on socialism?
Just to say, folks, never, never socialism. Put that in your heart. And as Jason said, no matter what you can or can't do financially, you need to spread the word to your friends and neighbors. Wake them up to the fact that socialism is biting at our heels.
Yeah.
And we've got to prevent it.
Absolutely. Larry, thanks very much for everything that you're doing, and thanks for joining me today. I will be back later tonight with Michael Moore of True Pundit for another episode of More Pain that's going to be available only to sponsors on patreon.com and also on Subscribestar. We've just started a new page on Subscribestar, so if people don't like doing business with PayPal, or if people don't like doing business with Patreon, you can now go to subscribestar.com/crowdsourcethetruth, and you're going to get access to all the exclusive programming that all of our other sponsors are enjoying, and you're going to help the cause. Larry, thanks very much for joining me today. Thanks everybody for watching. I'll see you later tonight.